Hello, welcome to Games Past the Prime. This is a show where I take a look at video games and determine if they are past their prime or not. For me to do so, though, there's a couple key categories for which I look at. Story, presentation, and gameplay. Then there's a conclusion section at the very end where I wrap everything up in a nice little bow. You guys have read the title. You know what game we're playing. Let's take a look at Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards. Kirby 64 came out in the summer of 2000 in North America. The story isn't outright told to you, but is shown through cutscenes. From my understanding, based on the opening, a being called Dark Matter invades a planet called Ripple Star, which happens to be the home to a bunch of fairies. Dark Matter attempts to take the sacred crystal, but before he can, a fairy named Ribbon flees with it. However, Dark Matter manages to catch up with the fairy and ends up shattering the crystal into a bunch of crystal shards. Ribbon ends up getting hit by Dark Matter, and the fairy ends up landing on the planet Popstar, where the fairy runs into Kirby. After what looks like a conversation should have happened, Kirby ends up deciding to help Ribbon collect all of the crystal shards and to defeat Dark Matter. Along the way, Kirby will run into a couple of his common frenemies, an artist named Adeline, King Dedede, and Waddle Dee. Kirby sets off with his allies and travels across 6 different planets, each having a different amount of stages, typically ranging from 3 to 5. After Kirby has collected all of the crystal shards, he will be taken to fight Dark Matter with Ribbon using the sacred crystal as a weapon to defeat him. Once they do defeat Dark Matter, all peace ends up being restored in the universe. The first thing you will notice upon starting up the game is that it looks really good, even now. It's got this sort of cartoon vibe to it that makes it a bit timeless in its look. It equally uses a great amount of color and contrast, and even in stages that are darker, which isn't exactly an easy thing to achieve. Every world has a different style that it attempts to mimic, such as spring and colorful worlds to a snow level to a more industrial level. You will honestly never really be bored by the level design. There is so much to see and it all is beautifully done. What I really love in some of these levels is that you move either left or right across the level, kinda like the original Super Mario Bros. However, this game does some things different that I think really add a lot. For example, there will be sections as you move that kinda change the direction for which you are moving. You'll still be moving left and right, but it'll look like you are moving towards the background. This adds a bit of depth to these levels and makes it really appear like you are moving through a 3D space. Another example of this is there is one level I can think of that has a split pathway that you will notice the first time you go through the level. Later you can come back and go through that split path. What makes this interesting is the split path ends up with Kirby either being in the foreground or background of this part of the level. However, the camera angle doesn't change, and it just really makes it look kinda neat. There are plenty of enemies to see, though after a while you will start to see the same ones over and over again, so after about the 3rd world you will start to notice these repeats. Now, this doesn't really hurt the game, and that's due to some of the game mechanics we'll talk about later in that gameplay section. I just love the bright and colorful worlds they were able to make, but when you fight Dark Matter, they show a lot more of a dark and sinister look. I just love this contrast because it really just shows how evil Dark Matter is in comparison to the rest of the worlds. Now, let's move on to the music, because I really didn't expect this game to have really much to offer when it comes to music. However, I am very pleased to say I was wrong upon first impression. This game may seem to be more geared to children, but man, the music is just fantastic. In fact, I would say it's probably my favorite part of this entire game was that soundtrack. Even though I had to play through stages multiple times to get all the crystal shards, it was never boring or annoying to do so because I was always looking forward to listening to the music in each stage. Now, I want to play you my favorites from the game, but there were so many that I actually had a hard time just picking a couple. However, I did manage to bring it down to just 3 for this session. So please enjoy this music, and hopefully you'll be surprised as much as I was. The gameplay of Kirby 64 is pretty simplistic, but it's done in a way that it isn't boring and doesn't get overly repetitive. You move using the D-pad rather than the control stick. Kirby can suck up air and float, and kind of fly if you continue hitting up on the D-pad multiple times, or you can do this exact same thing using the A button, though do note that Kirby can only hold air in his lungs for so long before he spits it out and starts to fall. When it comes to combat, there are a variety of ways to fight your enemies. First, you can use the air that Kirby sucks up and spit it back out at the enemies to beat them. Second, you can use the B button to suck up the enemies and shoot them out at other enemies. Now, we need to talk about Kirby's copy ability. See, certain enemies Kirby sucks up he can swallow and end up taking their ability. This can range from throwing bombs to using a sword or turning into a boulder, etc. There is so many. However, there is even more to this mechanic. If you suck up one of these enemies, you can then spit it out at another enemy that would normally give you an ability, and this will then combine the two abilities together to create a whole new, unique ability. This is what makes this game so much fun to play and continue playing. The game may be simplistic and a bit repetitive at times, but with this ability to copy enemies' abilities and to combine abilities, it makes it fun to try and find every different combination. Equally, when it comes to you collecting all the Crystal Shards, there will be certain parts of a level that you can only access by hitting it with a specific ability, which you can tell by looking at the wall, since it will have the colors that show what ability needs to be used on that specific wall to break it. Now, let's talk about the companions you get along the way and how they affect this game. See, as you progress through the first world, each level will end with a boss fight. These boss fights are the companions you'll get, but at this point they have been corrupted by the dark matter. Once you have beaten them, the dark matter will be knocked out of them, and they will then follow you throughout the rest of the game. First you will fight Waddle Dee, and once you have him following you, he will sometimes show up in levels and help you out of sticky situations, or more often will help you get through levels that will have rail sections, such as minecarts or sled to get down a mountain. Next you will fight Adelaide, and her boss fight consists of her painting enemies that you will need to fight. After you have beaten all of her paintings, she will come down to fight you and be taken out in one hit. Once this fight is finished, she will follow you, and in certain levels she will either paint something to help you, such as getting an item that gives you full health, or she will give you a hint on how to get a crystal shard from a puzzle in the next room over. The next boss will be King Dedede, and equally, just like the last two times before, after you have beaten him, he will then join up with you and the rest of your party. Now what he does to help you is that in certain levels, he will pick up Kirby and place him on his back, and this will then give you control over King Dedede, and you will use him to traverse levels and get through obstacles you might not have otherwise been able to do as Kirby. The game overall isn't all that difficult. However, this isn't to say that it has no challenge. As you progress through the game, you'll find that the last worlds and levels will have more enemies and spots that are fairly obnoxious to get past. You will also find water levels that can be pretty annoying at times, especially the one that has a current that can push you into enemies if you aren't timing things well. I would say overall that while this is a game that is more targeted to young teens, it is still pretty fun to play, and will pose enough of a challenge that you won't breeze through it. I ended up completing the game, and it took me about 7.5 to 8 hours of time, which isn't real short, but not too long either. It does a good job at getting you invested in the game, but without overstaying its welcome, which if I'm going to be honest is a pretty hard line to walk, but they managed to do it very well. The final verdict of Kirby 64 and the Crystal Shards is a game not past its prime. This was overall a pretty easy decision, to be honest. I was pleasantly surprised by how well this game held up compared to today. Sure, it may at times look a little blocky compared to games on the GameCube, but the color and aesthetic the game goes for allows it to have a timeless quality to it that allows it to look great even now, and I can only imagine how some people felt when they played this new. It must have been one of the better looking games at that time. Now, let's list the top 5 reasons this game is not past its prime. Number 1. As I already mentioned a little bit ago, the graphics are great. They use plenty of color, and frankly this is one of the better looking games so far on the N64 that I have personally played. Number 2. The music was a huge surprise for me. I expected it to be alright since most Nintendo games I have played so far have been decent soundtracks, but this game really blew all of that expectation out of the water. This has so much good music in it that, to be honest, I'm incredibly tempted to just add some of it to my normal music playlist. Number 3. The gameplay is simple yet fun. You gain abilities from your enemies and can even combine 2 abilities together to create a whole new one, which is super interesting. It makes replaying levels less of a chore, since you can just completely change up how you play that level by just having a different ability than you did the first time you played it. Number 4. The difficulty curve is actually incredibly well done. It starts out almost too easy, and slowly per world ramps up that difficulty that amounts to that last 2 boss fights being fairly difficult, but incredibly rewarding once you have beaten them. Number 5. Honestly, I beat this game in like 2 to 3 days. It was so fun that I hadn't realized how much time I had really sunk into it, and that to me really shows how good a game is. When you are playing a game and lose track of time, that is one of the biggest compliments you can give a game in my opinion, because that just means I really got sucked into whatever you were trying to show me or communicate to me, and if you can suck me in like that, then you did a good job at also holding my attention for a long and fun-filled period of time. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did enjoy watching it, please consider subscribing. I upload videos every week on Sundays. Stay tuned to the end of the video to get an audio hint at what the next video will be. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and thanks for watching.